Undercover CEO orders wine. Waitress secretly slips him a note that stops him cold. Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened. The gleaming chrome and hushed luxury of the Gilded Spoon, nestled in the heart of the city's most exclusive district, projected an aura of unattainable elegance. Polished surfaces reflected the soft glow of Art Deco chandeliers, casting long, languid shadows across the crisp white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. The air was a delicate blend of expensive perfumes, aged wine, and the faint tantalizing scent of gourmet cuisine, a carefully curated olfactory experience that hinted at the price tags on the menu. This was a realm where conversations were murmured, laughter was restrained, and every patron exuded an air of quiet, confident wealth. Amidst this meticulously crafted tableau of opulence, moved Alara, a waitress, whose presence was as unobtrusive as the whispered wishes of the patrons. Her uniform, a simple, unadorned black dress, with a crisp white apron, rendered her almost invisible, a part of the background tapestry of luxury service. Yet beneath that unassuming exterior, Alara possessed an acute sensitivity, a quiet intelligence that absorbed every detail of her surroundings. Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, missed nothing: the flicker of impatience in a customer's gaze, the subtle tension in a couple's clasped hands, the precise moment a wine glass needed refilling before it was even half empty. She moved with an economical grace, her steps silent, her movements fluid, as if she were an extension of the restaurant's flawless operation. Her quietness was not born of timidity, but of a deep well of observation, a profound understanding that the most important insights were often found in the subtle, unspoken cues. She understood the unspoken rules of this world, the intricate dance of expectation and fulfillment. Even as she occupied its most humble position, she had seen countless faces, served innumerable dishes, and witnessed 1,000 fleeting dramas unfold across the pristine table. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of distant jazz, the soft pad of expensive shoes on the plush carpet. It was all a symphony she understood intimately, a complex orchestration of human interaction and unspoken desire. She often wondered about the lives beyond the restaurant's gilded doors, about the stories behind the fleeting expressions she caught, the triumphs and anxieties, masked by casual conversation and expensive attire. There was a quiet dignity in her work, a meticulous dedication to perfection, that transcended the simple act of serving food. She took pride in the seamless flow of service, the unblemished gleam of a freshly polished plate, the precise placement of cutlery. These small acts of precision were her quiet rebellion against the perceived insignificance of her role, a testament to an inner world of order and profound capability that few, if any, ever recognized. This was her stage, a silent performance of excellence, observed only by the critical eye of the manager, Robert Hayes. Hayes was the restaurant's embodiment of superficial authority. He moved with a perpetually harried swagger, his perfectly gelled hair and perpetually pressed suit, unable to mask the undercurrent of insecurity that drove his every action. He believed himself to be the mastermind of the Gilded Spoon's success, a culinary maestro, whose every directive was gospel. In reality, he was a micromanager, obsessed with appearances, prone to barking orders, and quick to blame others for any minor imperfection. He thrived on the visible exercise of power, on instilling a pervasive sense of fear and subservience among his staff. To Hayes, the waitstaff were mere automatons, extensions of his will, their personal lives and capabilities utterly irrelevant. He dismissed their humanity, reducing them to interchangeable cogs in his meticulously controlled machine. Alara, with her quiet efficiency and unyielding dignity, was a particular irritant to him. Her calm composure in the face of his bluster, her refusal to be visibly flustered or intimidated, grated against his ego. He saw her silence, not as strength, but as a subtle defiance, an unspoken challenge to his authority. He believed she lacked the spirit, the drive, the flamboyance he thought necessary for a front-of-house role, and he took every opportunity to remind her of her perceived shortcomings, to push her, to try and break her composure. His taunts were often subtle, delivered under the guise of constructive criticism, but their intent was always clear: to belittle, to diminish, to enforce her perceived inferiority. He would loudly critique her plating technique in front of guests, or chastise her for a misplaced napkin, his voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby tables, his eyes gleaming with a perverse satisfaction when he saw a flicker of embarrassment in a junior colleague. But Alara remained unyielding, a quiet stone in the tumultuous current of his insecurity. She absorbed his barbs, processed them, and simply continued her work with the same unwavering professionalism, her gaze steady, her movements precise. This refusal to react, this quiet resilience, only served to fuel Hayes's frustration, intensifying his need to find her breaking point, to finally get the visible reaction he so desperately craved. He wanted to see her crumble, to prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was truly in control. He would find her weakness, he vowed, and when he did, he would exploit it for all to see, to solidify his own fleeting sense of power in this gilded cage. The tension within the gilded spoon, often masked by its elegant facade, tightened palpably whenever Robert Hayes entered the dining room. His presence was a storm, quiet but relentless, and Alara found herself increasingly at its center. He had intensified his campaign of microaggressions, seeking any opportunity to undermine her, to publicly assert his dominance. His dismissals of her efficiency became more overt, his criticisms more personal, echoing through the hushed dining room, as he spoke just loudly enough for nearby patrons to overhear. One evening, a VIP table, known for their demanding nature, placed an unusually complex order, involving multiple substitutions and bespoke preparations. Alara meticulously noted every detail, confirming each nuance with the guest, her pen gliding across her notepad with practiced ease. Hayes, observing from a distance, saw an opportunity. As Alara returned from the table, he intercepted her, his voice a low, biting whisper. "Alara," he hissed. His eyes narrowed. "Are you sure you understood that? These are important guests. We can't afford your quiet approach to detail. Maybe you should stick to simple orders." His words were a subtle jab at her reserved nature, implying her composure was a sign of intellectual inadequacy, rather than focused competence. Alara simply met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Yes, Mr. Hayes, I'm certain," she replied, her voice calm, devoid of the irritation she felt stirring within. Her lack of visible reaction infuriated him further. He craved the flush of embarrassment, the stammer of apology, the downcast eyes of a defeated subordinate. This stoic resilience was a direct challenge to his authority, a silent rebellion against his need for absolute control. The more she remained composed, the more agitated he became, his need to break her growing with each interaction. His behavior wasn't just limited to Alara. Hayes cultivated an atmosphere of fear among the entire staff. He publicly shamed a young busboy for a misplaced napkin, reducing the boy to tears with a venomous tirade about standards and professionalism. He dismissed a veteran bartender's legitimate concerns about a new, unworkable inventory system, scoffing at his experience, and calling his suggestions old-fashioned. He micromanaged every aspect of the restaurant, from the angle of the cutlery to the timing of plate delivery, leaving no room for autonomy or initiative. His focus was entirely on perceived imperfections, rarely on genuine solutions or staff well-being. He operated on a perpetual loop of complaint and blame, using his position to deflect any personal responsibility and maintain a fragile sense of superiority. His management style created a quiet, pervasive tension throughout the restaurant. Staff walked on eggshells, exchanging nervous glances and hushed whispers, terrified of drawing Hayes's ire. The once vibrant camaraderie among the team withered under his oppressive scrutiny, replaced by a sense of isolation and suppressed resentment. Each mistake, no matter how minor, was treated as a personal affront, a deliberate act of sabotage against his precious, gilded empire. He frequently boasted about his uncompromising standards to patrons, framing his abusive behavior as a necessary evil for maintaining the Gilded Spoon's reputation, subtly implying that his staff were incompetent and required constant, harsh oversight. Alara watched all of this with a quiet, discerning eye. She saw the fear in her colleagues' faces, the subtle tightening of their shoulders. When Hayes entered a room, she observed the inefficiencies born of this fear, staff hesitant to make independent decisions, preferring to wait for direct orders, even if it meant delays, valuable insights from experienced employees being ignored, a general stagnation of initiative and problem solving. Her observational mind, accustomed to seeing patterns and identifying systemic flaws, noted the profound disparity between the restaurant's outward facade of luxury and its internal dysfunction, a dysfunction directly fostered by Hayes's toxic leadership. She saw how his actions, far from enhancing the dining experience, subtly undermined it, creating an undercurrent of tension that even the most oblivious patrons might subconsciously perceive. Her quietness became not just a shield but a profound vantage point, allowing her to see the intricate web of cause and effect, the human cost of his arrogance. She understood that his behavior wasn't just about her. It was about a fundamental insecurity that warped his every interaction, a desperate need to control everything around him, because he so profoundly lacked control over himself. This deeper understanding solidified her resolve. She would not let him define her worth, nor would she allow his toxic presence to perpetually undermine the place she had come to know so intimately. She carried this quiet knowledge, like a secret weapon, waiting patiently for the opportune moment, for the critical mass of his escalating cruelty to become visible to someone who truly mattered, someone who could see beyond the gleaming chrome and the forced smile. Alistair Finch, the unassuming man who entered the Gilded Spoon that evening, was not merely another discerning patron. He was the CEO of the entire hospitality conglomerate that owned the restaurant, a figure whose presence could send seismic tremors through the industry. His attire was deceptively understated, a well-tailored but simple charcoal suit, a plain tie, no ostentatious jewelry. He chose a table in a quiet corner, allowing him a vantage point that offered a comprehensive view of the dining room, and more importantly, the subtle dynamics between staff and management. Finch was on an unannounced company-wide audit, a deep dive into the ground-level operations of his most prestigious establishments. He believed that the true health of a business wasn't reflected in quarterly reports alone, but in the unseen interactions, the morale of its employees, and the authentic experience of its customers. He was a keen observer, a man who built his empire by understanding the intricate human element of service, a detail often lost in the lofty discussions of boardrooms. As he settled into his seat, he noted Elara immediately. Her quiet efficiency, her almost ethereal movements, stood in stark contrast to the more bustling energy of the other waitstaff. He observed her calm demeanor even as a demanding patron at a nearby table made an unreasonable request, a request she handled with polite firmness, her solution both elegant and customer satisfying. He saw the genuine, albeit subtle smiles she elicited from her customers, a warmth that seemed to emanate not from obligation, but from an authentic desire to provide excellent service. Then, he noticed Robert Hayes's theatrical management style, his loud directives, his exaggerated gestures, grated on Finch's refined sensibilities. He watched, with a growing sense of unease, as Hayes publicly admonished a young busboy for a minor oversight, the boy's face crumpling under the manager's venomous tirade. Finch's jaw tightened. This was not the standard of leadership he cultivated within his conglomerate. This was performative, fear-based management, a cancer that could spread through the very soul of a service establishment. Elara's composure, however, truly intrigued him. He saw Hayes approach her table, his lips moving in a sharp, low whisper, his posture conveying dismissive authority. Elara merely nodded, her face unreadable, her shoulders straight. The lack of an emotional reaction, the unwavering dignity in her stance, spoke volumes to Finch. It wasn't resignation, it was something far deeper, a quiet power that defied humiliation. He found himself subtly testing her. He asked for an obscure vintage wine, a rare request that required not just knowledge, but a discerning eye for the subtle nuances of the menu and the cellar. Elara, without a moment's hesitation, confirmed its availability, her voice quiet, but confident, then returned minutes later with the perfectly presented bottle, her knowledge evident in her precise handling and description. Finch was impressed. This was beyond rote training. This was genuine understanding, a depth of knowledge that suggested a mind actively engaged, not merely going through the motions. His observations extended beyond the immediate interaction. He noticed Alara's innate ability to anticipate customer needs before they were voiced, her seamless coordination with the kitchen, her subtle adjustments to the flow of the dining room that optimized service without being overtly directed by Hayes. She moved like a silent conductor, orchestrating the unseen ballet of the restaurant's operations. Finch, an expert in operational efficiencies, began to recognize the elegant solutions Alara intuitively implemented, solving problems that Hayes seemed to perpetually exacerbate. He saw the subtle cues that others missed, the slight tilt of her head when she overheard a customer's passing comment, the way her eyes would track a potential bottleneck, her quiet initiative in resolving minor issues before they escalate. Her quiet efficiency was not merely a trait, it was a profound methodology, a system of observation and response that went unacknowledged, yet profoundly impacted the guest experience. It dawned on him that Alara was not just a waitress, she was an uncredited, unpaid operational analyst. Her insights gleaned from the trenches, from the very core of the customer experience. Her ability to navigate Hayes's toxic environment with such grace also spoke volumes about her resilience, her moral fortitude. She possessed a quiet strength, an inner compass that guided her through the daily indignities, keeping her focused on the true mission of service, while Hayes was preoccupied with the superficial display of power. Finch, whose own success was built on such nuanced observations and strategic insights, felt an undeniable pull towards her quiet competence. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his gut that there was far more to Alara than met the eye, a hidden depth that the manager in his arrogance was utterly blind to. He sensed a profound injustice, a talent being wasted, and a manager whose behavior was actively undermining the very essence of the Gilded Spoon. This insight, gleaned from his quiet observations, solidified his intent. He would not leave without addressing the systemic issues he had witnessed, and he knew with a growing conviction that Alara held a key to understanding the true health of his restaurant. The evening at the Gilded Spoon wore on, and Alistair Finch's discomfort with Robert Hayes's management style escalated from professional concern to outright indignation. He watched, utterly disgusted, as Hayes engaged in a particularly egregious act of public shaming. A young, nervous waiter, in his haste to deliver a complex order, accidentally tripped, sending a plate of exquisitely plated food crashing to the polished marble floor. The sound, a sharp, porcelain crack, sliced through the elegant hum of the dining room, drawing immediate attention. Before Alara or any other staff member could react, Hayes was there, his face contorted in a mask of furious indignation. He didn't offer a word of comfort or assistance to the trembling waiter. Instead, he launched into a venomous, ear-splitting tirade, his voice booming across the stunned silence of the dining room. "Are you utterly incompetent?" he roared, his face flushed. "Do you have any idea how much that costs? You are a disgrace, a liability. Get out of my sight before you ruin this entire evening." His words were laced with a cruel personal venom, deliberately designed to humiliate, to break the young man's spirit in front of a room full of gawking patrons. The waiter, mortified, visibly shrank, his eyes welling with tears, as he stumbled away, leaving the shattered plate and scattered food on the floor. Other staff members froze, their faces a mixture of fear and quiet anger, none daring to intervene. It was a raw, ugly display of unchecked power, a stark contrast to the sophisticated facade of the Gilded Spoon. Finch's jaw tightened. He had seen enough. This wasn't just poor management, it was abusive, an active destruction of morale, a clear violation of every principle he held dear about leadership. He glanced around the room, noting the uncomfortable murmurs from other patrons, the way conversations had stalled, the pervasive sense of unease that now permeated the air. This wasn't just impacting the staff, it was actively ruining the dining experience for his high-paying customers. Alara, however, was already moving. Without a word, she calmly approached the debris, a fresh cloth and dustpan in hand. Her movements were fluid, methodical, completely devoid of the panic or hesitation that gripped others. She knelt, her back straight, and began to meticulously gather the shattered porcelain and scattered food, restoring order to the chaos Hayes had created. Her quiet dignity in that moment, her unwavering focus on the task at hand, rather than the manager's lingering fury, struck Finch profoundly. It was an act of quiet defiance, a silent rebuke to Hayes's theatrical brutality. As she finished cleaning, Alara caught Finch's eye. Their gazes met across the room. There was no fear in her eyes, no appeal for pity, but a deep knowing weariness, a profound understanding of the injustice that had just transpired. And in that fleeting moment, Alara, with her uncanny intuition, honed by years of keen observation, recognized something in Finch's expression. It wasn't just the disapproval of a concerned patron, it was the intense analytical gaze of someone who saw beyond the surface, someone who truly understood the dynamics at play. She sensed a shared indignation, a flicker of outrage, that transcended the simple role of a customer. A quiet thought sparked in her mind. This man was different. He was truly seeing. An idea, bold and almost audacious, began to form. It was a desperate gamble, a break from her usual, invisible routine, but the raw injustice of Hayes's actions, and the silent suffering of her colleagues, ignited a quiet resolve within her. She knew she had to take a chance, to reach out across the chasm of their respective roles, to alert him to the deeper rot within the restaurant, something she was uniquely positioned to convey. As Alara approached Finch's table to offer him a dessert menu, her heart hammered a quiet rhythm against her ribs. Her movements remained outwardly serene, her face composed, betraying none of the internal turmoil. She placed the menu gently before him, her hand brushing against the pristine white tablecloth, and in that brief, almost imperceptible moment, as she straightened, she subtly slipped a small folded note onto the table, tucked neatly beneath the edge of the dessert menu. Her gaze met his for a split second, a silent plea, a profound act of trust, passing between them. Then, with a soft, "Enjoy," she turned and moved away, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and an exhilarating sense of having finally taken a stand. Finch, having observed the entire exchange with the fallen plate, watched Alara clean with an almost clinical detachment, yet his internal fury was simmering. He was already formulating a plan to address Hayes's behavior, to initiate an investigation into his management practice. His initial thought was to simply pay his bill, leave, and make a damning phone call to his corporate office. But then, as Alara's hand briefly touched the table, he felt the subtle brush of the small folded paper. His eyes, sharp and alert, caught the movement. He didn't react immediately, maintaining his composed demeanor. He waited until she had moved several tables away. Then, with a subtle flick of his wrist, he picked up the dessert menu, and with practiced discretion, retrieved the note. His fingers unfolded the tiny slip of paper, his eyes scanning the concise, elegant handwriting. The message was stark, simple, yet utterly profound in its implications. The rot is deeper than tonight's spilled plate. Look for the true costs in staff turnover, dwindling customer loyalty, and a culture of fear. This is not the spoon you built. The words stopped him cold. His initial fury at Hayes's cruelty transformed into a chilling understanding. This wasn't just about a bad manager. This was about a systemic issue, a fundamental corruption of the restaurant's very soul. And the fact that this insight came from Alara, the quiet waitress, from the very person Hayes had tirelessly tried to belittle, spoke volume. He looked up, his gaze sweeping the room, his eyes now seeing not just the individual interactions, but the silent, pervasive atmosphere of tension Alara had so succinctly described. He saw the guarded expressions of the staff, the stiff politeness that barely concealed their unease, the subtle avoidance of Hayes's gaze. Her note had peeled back the gilded veneer, revealing the deeper, festering wound beneath. It confirmed his suspicions, but more importantly, it delivered a precise, unvarnished truth from an unexpected source, validating his own intuition and deepening his resolve. Alara hadn't just reported an incident. She had offered a strategic diagnosis, a profound insight into the restaurant's true operational health. And he knew with a certainty that settled deep in his gut, that this unassuming waitress held the key to understanding the profound, unseen problems within his prized establishment. His dinner, once an objective audit, had become a pivotal investigation, triggered by a silent message from the very heart of the operation.